Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming, and a little discussion style video about the Vocations of Dragons Dogma 2. I'm going to be ordering them in the classic tier list today. As you can see from this tier list though, there is S, A, B and C, because none of these vocations are like ultra bad. All of them can beat the game and do very well. However, some are very clearly better than others in terms of what it brings to the table. Utility for exploration or combat, ease of play, the actual DPS output. Keep in mind that this is entirely subjective, and of course for fun, we're going to work our way up from the bottom and see what we actually have. Only one vocation, and this probably isn't that controversial. It's Trickster. Trickster is a very cool, very unique vocation. Never directly fighting, confusing and bamboozling the foes. And its implementation isn't necessarily bad. The idea that you can create these illusions of yourself and move the enemy around, bait them into jumping into bad locations, get them to attack each other, the ultimate skill to hard stun in AoE, it's very potent. The issue is that most of it relies on your pawns or gravity. There's a very repetitive playstyle and it's usually terrain based. Sometimes the terrain is not very kind, which leaves you relying on pawns. I feel like this vocation would be well served in other games, perhaps where the AI is just more reliable and effective. I still really like this vocation, but even in the case of Cotton, who really thought he would go in maining this vocation, it just didn't hit how I guess we imagined or hoped. Moving up to B then, we have Fighter, which is one of my favorite vocations just in design and concept. It's just this great all-rounder. Obviously though, I've got it down in B, and that's pretty much because of what it brings to the table in terms of utility being lacking, but then also the raw output is obviously on the lower side compared to most vocations. That's understandable. The purpose of this vocation is to distract and be the main target. The satisfying gameplay of blocking, or more importantly, parrying and countering attacks is awesome. Its master teaching allows for a nice DPS combo as an option. The issue with Warrior for me as a vocation is that it's kind of the same thing as Warrior, but with less DPS potential, with less force impact to control a fight. As long as the attention's on you, you can do a lot, but it has to be on you the whole time. Otherwise your counter is inconsistent and awkward and hard to land, and it's just not got that raw power that other vocations do have. Still, I really love the vibe of this and the design. I love playing it, but that's why I just have it at B. Also down in B, and this is more of a controversial one, is Archer, because it's actually an A tier vocation. But when you start the game, my god is this B tier. The raw DPS output, it's not there. It's not until you get some particular weapon skills that it really starts to hit. Obviously you have the forceful impact of say the master skill, or the repeat ticks on the right weak points as a ranged weak point punish. When you really get the augments, really start to get some gear, the DPS really starts to get good. But when you start the game so slow, so weak, so vulnerable when enemies really force and attack you. And I must admit, it really irked me that out of all the vocations, only the Archer has to pay for their ammunition in terms of their special element attacks like the explosive shot, or tarrying and so on. You're limited to how many you have. It's a little extra thing to manage that no one else has to deal with, which I think is just unfortunate. And mid to late game, it absolutely is an A tier output capacity. But there is an issue with its single-minded approach with the damage that it does, but god is it good at abusing weak points, so it's kind of like a A/B for me. Next up we have A tier, where I'm going to start with Mage. This is controversial or awkward to place because it's not A tier for sure. It's 100% S tier if you are not playing it. If your pawn is playing it, whether that's temporary or your main one, from the mage, you're going to get an incredible roster of things. The AoE cleanse to get rid of debuffs that are really annoying. The AoE heal that every mage has keeps your pawns alive consistently. Then you've got the AoE attack speed, movement speed buff, incredible for traversal, amazing for combat, or the master teaching for that big bubble that gives you infinite stamina while it's going. Unbelievably good. And the weapon boons, my god, you swap those around based on what you're about to do, but if you're playing it, my god, it's miserable. You're so vulnerable when playing it. And obviously you can help maintain the pawns, give them the right buffs and all that, but I feel its output and its slow nature makes it quite hard to really enjoy when you're playing it. So with how good it is when it's a pawn playing it, and with how bad it is to play, I think A tier is where it's fairly placed. Next up though, we have Magic Archer, Also in A tier. This is great. It has an answer to any situation. If you need this element or that element, there's funky stuff like the bouncing arrows. The ranged revive for pawns is an absolute dream. You even have like physical blunt damage if you want to do that charged up ice shot. If there's a problem, you can solve it with the right setup. And it does have one of the most busted master skills in the entire game. Martyr's Bolt can kill damn near anything in one use, as long as you're willing to sacrifice the health temporarily, which is obviously a risk, but very worth it when it's going to kill whatever you're dealing with. The issue for this, for me, is it has a lower consistent DPS sort of ceiling. It's also very stamina hungry, so if you're playing it wrong, you can find yourself sort of staggering around very often. It has that answer to everything, but I think it's a little slow in applying it. It doesn't have that raw oomph outside of the master teaching, which is very good. It's absolutely A tier worthy, and there's arguments for S tier. Also in A, we have Warrior, which I'll nicely put here above Fighter. This is the thing between the Warrior and the Fighter. If you want the attention off the team, well, yeah, you can do that, just like the Fighter. Except you also have the raw burst, the damage to back it up. You have counters, just like the Fighter. You have forceful impact to stagger or knock enemies down, but even better. You control the fight actually more efficiently. They both have the ability to throw pawns up high if that's needed. It's just unfortunate to me that everything the Fighter can do, the Warrior pretty much can do, but better. And it's also just a very satisfying playstyle. The ability to charge things up and smash, go for faster combos based on a rhythm timing thing. It's very cool in its design. It's very mechanically fun to play. Having just a big weapon on your back in this fantasy world, it just hits right. But it does require that timing, and obviously it suffers when dealing with anything ranged, and it is completely single-minded in its physical damage. And that's why I hold it down in A rather than S. But that brings us to S tier, where we obviously have 4 more vocations. So let's get straight to it. My starting vocation was Thief, and it turned out to be the highest DPS vocation in the game. While it doesn't have the most burst in the game, it definitely has the highest consistent DPS, because nothing is going to stop the Thief from dealing damage. Any attack coming from the enemy, you can swift step to evade. But at a certain point with a master teaching that's absolutely busted, you no longer need to do that. Sure, it's going to consume some stamina over a time, but it's not much, and we have infinite stamina resources if there's a mage pawn on the team with the master teaching. That infinite iframe ability means you're able to even attack yourself with that explosive weapon buff. It sets your weapons on fire for a fire element. It explodes in AoE, amazing for medium or normal enemy clearing. It causes staggers, and it's great DPS in general. You also have the Skull Splitter ability, which is the highest consistent DPS ability in the game. It is the #1 weapon skill to combine with Sorcerer's Flare for maximum potential with that ability. Thief also comes with passives to give you a % chance to steal items, so you just get more resources, materials, and everything while having a Thief on the team passively. And it's great for exploration because there's a few cool tricks you can do to actually move around and overcome vertical challenges. There's never a bad time to have a Thief on the squad, whether you're playing it or you have a pawn doing it. Next up, let's talk Sorcerer, which I think a lot of people might consider actually an A tier pick, but because of the Augural Flare ability, I definitely have it in S tier for that. That's the single most important spell to have on the team if you can have it. The Flare is very simple. You apply it to a point on the enemy, and then for a period of time, you can attack that point to charge up damage. This leads to the biggest burst of damage in the game that you can consistently do that's not like an ultimate ability that's going to cost you health with Magic Archer. Being the Sorcerer is fine because you pop the flare on the weak point. That means you get to choose, okay, the head or the heart of the Drake or whatever you specifically aim it. And then you have the Thief on your team or whoever deal damage to it and instantly kill whatever you're dealing with. Obviously, they have some of the biggest burst options in the game with the Meteor Slams, the Tornado AoEs, the ridiculously potent element of whatever it is you need in that moment. They have incredible control. They bring a lot of burst to the squad. It's always good to have one. I do feel that it's a little bit slow, and personally, it's not like S tier for me, but I respect its output that I think it is S tier. Next in S tier, we have the Mystic Spearhand. Incredibly cool. What a class design concept. Outside of how cool and unique it is, it's also mechanically fantastic. Its core skill of the Redoubted Bolt is one of the most overpowered, but maybe the best core skill in the game. AoE snare stuns, leading to instant executes for you in the pawns. Every medium pack of enemies no problem, they're done immediately. Teleportation for incredible ability to get to the weak points so easily. If there's a ranged enemy, no problem, your heavy attacks can deal with that, or you just teleport to them. If you need consistent DPS, you can do the infinite spin combo on the weak point for really solid output. You make your team and yourself literally immune to damage with the shield. There's all kinds of fun with this very unique playstyle. The control that you get, you have an answer to most situations. You're kind of a mix of physical and magical with some great mobility options too. The only thing that really holds it back compared to other S tier picks here is its DPS potential. It's probably got the lowest out of the 4 we're going to talk about. Overall though, it is just kick-ass. And that brings us to the final vocation of the video. Of course, it's Warfarer. And some people argue that this isn't necessarily S tier because it doesn't have as much output because of the lower base stats, but I truly feel that's wrong. In my opinion, with a Warfarer, the best situation you can have is an answer to melee, an answer to ranged, and the best utility that you can think of. For me, this is the combination of Thief and Sorcerer and Mystic Spearhand. Yes, the other 3 S tier picks. Crazy. With the Mystic Spearhand, you have the shield for immunity to damage for you and the party. You also get the best core skill with Redoubted Bolt for mobility and control. With Sorcerer, you swap to it if you need the range damage, if you want to levitate to get around the world, or to apply the flare to the target for maximum DPS potential. For Thief, you swap to that to actually deal the damage, spamming of course Skull Splitter as your weapon skill. To keep it simple, you swap to the Sorcerer, apply the flare, swap to the Thief, and spam splitters and combos. If you need the utility and control, you have the Mystic Spearhand with the shield and the core skill. You're good to go for any situation, though there are other options that are great too. To maximize Warfarer, you must maximize the combos of the weapons and the vocations, but I don't think that's so hard if you just run Sorcerer and Thief and call it a day. But there you have it. That's the order that I think best represents the game at its launch. If you've skipped to the end just for any reason, I want to let you know that Mage is S tier if you have it in the team on a pawn, whereas I really don't like to play it myself, so I balanced it at A. And I find Archer quite weak at the start and awkward with the way that it has to buy ammo for like explosive shot and so on, but its DPS in the mid to late game becomes pretty damn phenomenal, and that's where I put it at A tier. Once again, remember that if you're playing a vocation that's down lower like B tier, it's still going to be fine. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.